Welcome to the Winning Platform Owner Podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to enabling ServiceNow platform owners with valuable knowledge, tools, and strategies. You know, as winning platform owner, it can sometimes feel like you're being pulled in about 10 different directions at once. And it seems like the more successful you are, the more successful the platform is at your organization. That just gets worse and worse. And so you're pulled in all different directions. And in those times, it's surprisingly easy to lose focus. And you end up paying more attention to the chaos around you than you do to the day-to-day, day in, day out fundamentals that made you successful in the first place. The fact is the fundamentals matter over time. When done well, they enable success. And when done poorly or ignored altogether, well, they may just sink the ship. So if you're ready to talk day in, day out fundamentals for a winning platform owner, then let's go. All right, well, welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Ben Pierce. I wasn't trying to be over dramatic in that introduction about this topic, but I do feel really passionately about the general topic of sticking to the fundamentals and how doing the quote unquote small things right over and over again, how that really just improves your long-term results. So that's why the passion in my voice for this topic. Well, it's good to have you here for the podcast. The podcast is all about helping ServiceNow platform owners get better at what we do. So if you're not a platform owner, no worries. You're definitely welcome. You'll get value. If you are a platform owner, then you're in the right place. And I invite you to subscribe to this podcast. Go look me up on LinkedIn. Let's get connected. I'd love nothing more than to connect with you and be any help that I can to you on your ServiceNow platform owner journey. Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about the importance of paying attention to those fundamentals as a ServiceNow platform owner. And I'm talking about things that, you know, they're not usually glamorous. They're just basic things, but they're things that I believe you have to do to be successful over time. And really that over time idea, I think, is key to doing this right, because you may not see results in the near term, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that you stop doing the fundamentals. But when you're doing those fundamentals and you're doing the right things over and over, you're really playing the long game. And when you do start to see results, and they will come, and they'll come with a momentum behind them because of doing the fundamentals over and over again. They'll come with a momentum behind them that you just can't get if you haven't put in the time of doing the small things, doing the fundamentals right. So that's what the episode's going to be about. We're going to talk about 4 or 5 of these things that I really feel like are core fundamentals for a platform owner. And look, it's easy to get distracted from these things. All it takes is a busy week, and you could get knocked off track on the fundamentals. So they're really important, and they're really easy to forget. And that's why I wanted to do this episode, so that I can hopefully help you kind of zero in on the fundamentals if you're in one of those times where you're just hair on fire and going 100 miles an hour. And if you're not, it's just a good reminder on some of the basics that are really important as a ServiceNow platform owner. All right, so fundamental number 1, pay attention to your team members. And I'm talking about checking in on the people, not the work, just the people. People are the most important thing, right? You could have a great implementation of ServiceNow. The platform could be in great health. The ServiceNow platform is just powerful all by itself, right? But without people, you're not going to get very far. So fundamental number 1 is all about the people. And what I'm talking about here is really getting to know the folks that are on your team, even stakeholders, the folks that are around you, get to know them. Get to know what makes them tick. Yeah, get to understand their spouses, their husbands, wives. What are the kids' names? What are they all up to, right? Get to know them. And this takes time. It's not something that you can do overnight, but you have to regularly focus on your team, focus on the people on your team, and really around the platform. The reason this is important is because at some point, you're going to run into one of your team members or a stakeholder on the platform, and they're going to be stressed. And the reason that you're going to know that they're stressed is because you know them when they're not stressed. And you'll know more quickly when something isn't right. And you can help address it. You can help them instead of misinterpreting some of their actions or even words. It's important. You have to really know your people, pay attention to your people. If you don't routinely pay attention to your team members, then you can't make up that time when you really need it most. And when you need to understand that, hey, this person's under stress and I need to help them through that. So pay attention to your team. People are number one. That's the number one fundamental that it's tempting to skip out on it. It's really tempting, but you got to take the time to do it. Take the time to get to know your folks day in, day out, over and over again, and that really pays off. Fundamental number 2, take care of the backlog. Grueling, tedious work. I guess it depends on your personality, but at least that's how I look at it. But it's very, very important. That's why it's fundamental number 2. What do I mean by taking care of the backlog? Really, it boils down to continually grooming that backlog. Being intentional about it. Making sure you have weekly cadences or every few day cadences where you're paying attention to that backlog. You're making sure the stories are in good form in there. You're making sure things are prioritized appropriately, ready to pull for the team if they need to be pulled. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. If you're lucky, you have a Scrum Master who can help you do this on your team, but not all of us are that lucky, so it may fall to you as the platform owner to do this backlog grooming and to take care of it. At the end of the day, whether you have a Scrum Master or not, the A is on you, right? You're accountable to make this happen. And the worst thing that you can do is not take care of your backlog, get to sprint planning, and then spend half the time grooming up the backlog. That's a waste of time, and it's actually kind of demoralizing for the team. So always keep the backlog in good shape. That is a fundamental basic. You have to do it day in, day out. Always pay attention to it. You can't forget about it. At the end of the day, a ServiceNow backlog is more than just, hey, this is a big pile of ideas. You know, I've been on Agile teams before where people are just like, yep, throw it in the backlog. If it's not on the backlog, it'll never get done. And that's true. But for ServiceNow, it's really just not that big pile of ideas. You really have to pay attention to it. It should be cleaned. It should be prepared. And that way, when you have an opportunity, maybe you have some extra capacity or something didn't got canceled out of a sprint or it didn't take as long, you could pick something up and it's ready to go. And when you have those kinds of opportunities, you don't have time to take care of an unkept backlog. It's going to be too late. So you want to keep that backlog up, and that helps you keep your momentum going. So that's fundamental number 2. All right, fundamental number 3, maintain cadence and ceremonies. In my experience, nothing disrupts the flow of value more than being kind of undisciplined at sprint cadences and missing agile ceremonies. See, when you allow that to happen, as a platform owner, you're asking for issues in delivery because you're introducing unpredictability in the normal cadence and flow. And so it's easy, though, to kind of get out of sync. It's easy to miss showbacks and just be like, well, we didn't have time this week. Or it's easy to miss grooming, like we talked about in the last fundamental. Or it's easy to miss sprint planning, or, any one of these different ceremonies that are part of your cadence. You want to stick to it. You want to maintain the cadence. You want to maintain that predictability. You keep the engine moving at the appropriate RPM, and you just keep delivering value. And that gets tough to do when you're under the gun. When people are coming at you from all different directions, it's hard to maintain that cadence. And it's something that you really actually have to protect it and protect your team. Help your team maintain those cadences, because a lot of times they're just as tempted to skip out on the cadence as you are as a busy platform owner. But that's a recipe for disaster, because you do not want to upset that normal flow, that normal delivery of value. And so that's why it's fundamental number 3. You really have to stick to this fundamental in order to produce like rhythm and steady flow. All right, we've gone through 3 so far. The first fundamental is pay attention to your team, take care of the people. Fundamental number 2, take care of the backlog. Fundamental number 3, maintain cadence and ceremonies. Fundamental number 4 is watch for technical debt. It's easy to look the other way, especially when everybody's under the gun, when you're trying to get things delivered. It's easy to look the other way when you feel that your team may be introducing a little bit of technical debt. Maybe things aren't done quite up to standard in terms of best practice or your coding standards. But you're like, ooh, man, this is good. It's going to provide a lot of value. It's actually pretty high visibility. We need to get this enhancement in, or we need to get this fixed. That's when it's kind of easy to look the other way on technical debt. You don't want to do that. You want to keep the radar going, right? And in tune to technical debt that may show up. You want to fight that battle. You always want to fight that battle. That's why it's a fundamental. You should always be looking for, am I introducing technical debt? Are we introducing it on the platform? Or how can we reduce technical debt, right? When you allow technical debt to show up, it means that you're going to pay the price at some point, right? That's why it's called technical debt. So if you don't take the time to be intentional about screening for it, it will just show up, right? And it's kind of the old adage, I wasn't trying to make a mess of things. Yeah, but were you trying not to? I don't think so, right? So that's kind of how you should think about technical debt. You always have to be trying not to incur technical debt. And as a platform owner, man, you got to have the radar up. You got to be watching for it. It can sneak up on you. And it's not that anybody's trying to do it on purpose or introduce it on purpose. It's just, hey, we're under the gun and we're trying to get things done. That's why this fundamental really matters. If you ingrain this fundamental day in, day out, you're watching for the technical debt. That's not to say you're never going to have technical debt. In fact, you may take it on purpose, right? That's kind of a business decision. Is there enough value to warrant the administrative overhead of the technical debt that we're introducing here? That's a valid decision point. More often than not, no, though, that's not how technical debt shows up. It's because we're not watching for it. And then all of a sudden it builds up, it snowballs, and pretty soon you're paying the price. So fundamental number 4, watch for technical debt. All right, and last but not least, certainly not least, is fundamental number 5, which is making sure all work is tied to business value. This starts clear back at your demand management processes, right? but it's something that you have to intentionally and continually ensure all throughout your value delivery stream. Is this tied to business value? Have we gone off course on this, or are we staying true to the value that we were desiring to deliver in the first place? If you get too busy to do this, and it's easy to do because, when you're in the midst of going 100 miles an hour, this takes time to do. It's easy to forget. It's easy to push it back to the back burner. But when you don't do it, you risk wasting time and money, because ultimately the team has the potential of delivering things that are of zero value to the business, worst case scenario, and best case scenario, maybe some mediocre things that really you go, wow, we shouldn't have wasted that time. We shouldn't have wasted that effort. We could have used it on something way more valuable. So it's good to be in the habit of always making that mental connection. Okay, the work that we're doing, how is this tied to business value? So that anytime you're looking at, whether you're looking at your backlog, whether you're looking at stuff that's in a current sprint, whether you're reviewing stuff that's been completed, keep that in your mind. What it allows you to do also is to ensure that you can always articulate the value of the work that your team is doing. You're always in a position to do that because you're always thinking about it. It doesn't take a lot of mental preparation if somebody stops you in the hallway and asks you about that. You can communicate to them, what I call value snapshots, which are just basically use cases on a problem that got solved and the value that you brought to it to solve that problem and bring value to the organization. If you're constantly making sure that all your work is tied to value and you're going through that mental exercise on a regular basis, it's a really easy conversation. You have like 100 use cases to choose from. And so it's very important to make sure that you're not wasting time and money, but it's also important to make sure that you're giving yourself every edge you can as you're communicating, this is what my team or teams are doing, and this is why it's providing value to the organization. So that's fundamental number 5, making sure all your work is tied to business value. All right, there you go. That's my top 5 fundamentals. And maybe as we were going through this, you've already thought of maybe 1 or 2 that you would add to the list. If so, awesome. That is great. I think, the point of the episode is, look, there are fundamentals. And if you do not stick to the basic fundamentals that have made you successful as a ServiceNow platform owner, then you risk not being as successful over the long term. So you can't forget about them. And that's really the gist of the episode. Remember the fundamentals, stick to them, stay disciplined, and you will be a successful platform owner. All right, that's what I've got for you today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Consider sharing it out there on LinkedIn or whatever social media you are on the most. And reach out to me on LinkedIn. Connect. I would consider it a privilege to be connected with you if you're a ServiceNow platform owner. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time on the Winning Platform Owner Podcast.